There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello and welcome as we spend some more time together on the Learning on Fire podcast. Today I'm talking to Zach Hesterberg. Hi Zach, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much for having me.
So why don't we start a little bit with one where you are in the world. People from the UK will be here that there's definitely not a UK accent there, and a little bit of your general life and setup as you are at the moment.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, as you said, my name is Zach. Man, who I am? Well, I'm a 24-year-old. I'm living in St. Louis, Missouri, so smack in the middle of the United States. Right now there's a lovely 13 inches of snow outside. So
wow.
Yeah, so got that going. What I do professionally, I spend most of my time running Facebook ads. I run these advertisements for clients, so they will pay me. It's pretty much like an agency model, so they'll pay me to help them get more customers and get more clients. And so I do that all through Facebook ads. And so I do a little bit of speaking. I also have a podcast. So, but it's all based around Facebook ads.
And how did you get into that as a sort of a model for how you wanted to live your life?
Okay, so well, I didn't realize it was going to be a model for how I wanted to live my life. It was something I actually just kind of fell into when I got into, I guess you guys would call it university. We usually call it college here in the States. But when I got to college in, I guess, my freshman year, I went there for volleyball on a volleyball scholarship. And it was a really, really small school. And Mark, I don't know if you know too much about the college system in the States, but for most employers, if you go to a really small school, that small school is just not going to matter to that employer. So I knew from the start I had to do something to really build up my resume and really make myself more attractive for a potential employer. And so I said, okay, well, I might as well start getting some internships right from my first year in college or my first year in university. And so I got 3 or 4 different internships, all within about 2 years, and each one was kind of all around the realm of digital marketing. I knew I loved marketing, and I'll talk a little bit about how I knew I liked marketing later on in the show, but I knew I liked marketing, so I got some digital marketing internships, and one thing led to another. And I actually, spoiler alert for also something I'll talk a little bit more later in the show, is I talked to one of my teachers, and he kind of helped guide me in the route of, hey, maybe you should start a digital marketing agency. And I went out and got my first client, and from there it's just kind of snowballed, and it led me into having a career after I graduated. So it just I kind of fell into it, I suppose.
I guess the thing I like about that the most is the fact that even from the get-go, you were kind of purposeful about knowing what you were trying to aim for, even if it was just in terms of getting out there, meeting people, like say, getting your internships, rather than there are lots of people, I don't know, you get a feeling, certainly in the UK sometimes, it's kind of, well, I go to school and hopefully get some great grades, and then I'll go to college and study something I'm kind of interested in, and then I'll kind of come out. And in this day and age, it doesn't really work anymore. You know, it's that kind of, you need to have more than just having gone through the system, and it sounds like you really appreciated that. And I mean, from my perspective, you hear about the Ivy League colleges and that kind of thing, and I can understand from what you just said now why there's such a sort of a reason for wanting to be involved in some of those very prestigious colleges over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not even just so much the prestigious colleges. It's just that I grew up from a very just a typical middle class background, and I wanted something that was going to be able to give me an amazing job later on in life. Maybe like working for Nike or like Apple or like some huge company. I thought that I wanted to climb the corporate ladder, and I thought in order to do that I needed to either go to a really large school, or I had to have a lot of experience by the time I graduated, because I know one thing to be true, and that is when you graduate graduate from school, whether that be your high school diploma or your college or university diploma, you're not guaranteed that next step in life. You're not guaranteed that job. So I knew that I had to put my best foot forward and do something about that.
Yeah, no, that really does make sense. And like I say, you're only 24, but what does your life look like now, and how is it different from when you were growing up? And I guess that's in terms of where you live and how you live, and also your experiences of your sort of family life, I guess.
Definitely. So right now I am, as far as marital status or anything, I'm actually engaged. So if you ask me that question in a couple months, a lot would be changed. But so right now I'm actually getting closer to my being married. We'll be getting married here in June of 2019, and then actually it looks like we'll be moving to Nashville, Tennessee, which is a up and coming city that's actually growing very, very fast in the United States. But as far as now between, oh man, I mean, as far as growing up and now, I'd say the main thing that's changed is my lifestyle. Whenever I was growing up, I mean, I've been born and raised by an awesome set of parents. They're still together, still love them. I have a great relationship with them and everything. And I also have a sister. But we just, like I said, we were just from a typical middle class background. Maybe took that like once a year vacation, and it was a real small like weekend trip. And so I always wanted to travel more. I always wanted to actually see the ocean and go to other countries and experience more cultures and just experience more in life. And so when I started my company, I actually just made a Facebook post about this not too long ago. I was saying that when I started my company about 2 or 3 years ago, I'd wrote down a goal, and I said that whatever company and whatever route this company decides to take me, I will build it in a way that I can live and travel wherever I choose, and that my work does not, I guess my work does not affect where I live or where I travel to. And so I went from maybe taking a once a year vacation for like a weekend to now I travel all the time. Last year, I think I was gone about probably about 80 days of the 365 days in a year. So I get to travel a lot now. I also I'd say that my other thing that has changed is just being able to live above my means. I make enough that I can actually give back to different charities and give back to organizations that I support. And it's just nice being able to, I guess, have that change from whenever I was a kid to now.
And it's really nice to hear that, that actually having a goal or having a vision of how you want your life to be, and just in whichever way it comes, being able to put that into place and see that come to fruition, I think is a wonderful thing to hear from us listening. And congratulations on the engagement, and I wish you all the success for that in the summer.
Thank you very much.
And Nashville is a fantastic city. I went to a conference there back in September last year, and we absolutely loved it. The conference finished on a Friday late afternoon, I think, and a few of us were flying back to wherever we were going from on the Saturday. So we went out into downtown Friday evening.
That Broadway.
Nashville. Yeah.
Yep.
Just incredible. And as a musician myself, I'm a drummer. We're just in some of these small bars with just the most amazing musicians, so talented and just live and vibrant. And yeah, there is nothing like it that I've experienced anyway.
Definitely. It's a really cool city. I mean, they definitely have a large focus on music, and specifically live music at almost everywhere you go.
I think it's just one of those places where you just know that if you just want to get out and feel what living life is like, it gives you that in abundance for sure.
Yeah, I suppose.
What was valuable about your school experience?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and this is something I overlook quite often, which was back in high school. I guess back in high school, I don't know about where you're from, Mark, but for the States, we get really into sports in our high school sports. And so like our basketball team and our football team, like they have really big fan sections. And so all of the high school students will all stand up throughout the entire game. They do all these fun cheers, and like they'll dress up for the games and everything, and they get really into it. And actually, my 10th grade year, or my sophomore year, all the way up to my senior year of high school, I was able to pretty much lead the fan section at my school. My school had about 1,200 kids, And I had the opportunity just through pretty much networking and just kind of fell into the position as well. But I had the opportunity to pretty much take our fan section over. And so from my sophomore year to my senior year, I was able to really come out of my shell and learn what leadership was and learn what marketing was because whenever I was a sophomore and they saw a 10th grader running the fan section, not many people were going to the games because they didn't respect me. And so then I had to figure out how could I get more people to go to the games. And so I was posting more flyers around school. And I remember our school had a limit of you could only host or you could only post 25 flyers around the school. And I remember what they do is like they'll stamp your flyer and then they'll make you 25 flyers so that way you don't have any more than that to go hang up. And so I got my 25 made and then went to a different printer and printed off about 300 of them. And for the first game of the season, my sophomore year, I went and I put about 325 flyers up in our school just by myself. Me just putting some tape on them, putting them on every single locker in all the different bathrooms and everything. And the next morning I definitely got in trouble for that, but there was a huge attendance at that next game. And then I ended up getting to talk my principals into letting me make announcements on the intercom to promote the games. And I was using social media to get more people to games. So I was just getting more experience with marketing and advertising, and I had no clue that I actually was doing that in the time of it. I was just trying to figure out how do I get more people to the games. And then whenever they got to the games, it was just trying to figure out how can I be the best leader possible and how can I lead by example and show these people what it's like to cheer our team on and actually have fun doing it. And so by doing that, I learned a lot of leadership skills. So I would say that was probably one of my most valuable experiences about school is being able to lead that fan section for a couple different years.
I think often it is that kind of you get experience and you get something out of an experience which you weren't expecting to, and I think schools often like that. I was thinking about recently about how when I was going through music college after I'd left school, and some of the things I used to do in terms of surviving in some ways, because it's quite stressful being a musician and we had quite a lot of things we needed to learn and it was sort of long hours and that kind of thing. And some of the things that I actually did in order to support myself to get through all that kind of thing, in terms of sort of exercise and looking after and sort of sleep and immersing myself in various activities which I found supportive. I didn't think of them specifically at the time, but now looking back as someone in my 40s, I'm sort of thinking, well, how do I look after myself now as I start to get older and I want to do stuff? And actually, the things you sort of often do naturally are actually there because that's what your body or your mind tells you should do. It's only afterwards you start to realise that actually you can pick up all these things just by doing what really feels right, and then it's often later you kind of work out the mental side of why that was going on.
Yeah.
Which teachers do you remember and why?
Yeah, so I guess probably two of them are specifically coming to mind, and I'm sure there are so many more than that. But the two specifically that are coming to mind are both from my university, and one's name was Mark Turpin, and the other's name was Mark Glenn, or it was Wayne Glenn. And Mark Turpin, he was a personal finance teacher, and going into this class, I thought this was going to be a very, very boring class. It was just kind of like balancing your checkbook and like just learning about some finance. And it was like my first year in college. So I didn't think anything of this class. I didn't think it was going to affect me much. But what was interesting was that Mark, the teacher, or the professor, he was actually he's the president of the local bank in town. And so he had the luxury of knowing what all of the different professions made, because all of the people that were banking with his bank, he knew how much they were depositing every week. Obviously, he had to keep names and everything anonymous. But one day he went through and he called on every single person in the classroom and said, "What's your major and what do you plan to do with it?" And he was tearing people apart. I remember one girl, she was studying. I think it was like, oh gosh, you're in the music field, so I don't know the specific name of her degree. I think it was like music theory, or I think it was music theory. Anyway, he's like, "What in the world are you going to do with that? That's going to make you more than $30,000 a year." And like this poor shy little girl, she's like, "Oh, I don't really know. Like she was quivering. Like this guy was kind of a scary guy. He's like, well, he's like, look at it like this. And then for every single person, he might break them down, but then he would give us a really great example of how to actually utilize our passion and actually make a good living off of it, instead of just going the traditional route of maybe being a music teacher, or instead of if you're going to be like, whenever I said, hey, I was majoring in marketing, he said, okay, great. You have two ways you could go with this. Actually, three. You could really screw up, or you could really do something good with this. He's like, you screw up by just going and being a marketer for one business. If you're just a marketer for like a business like Pepsi, you're going to screw up, because these businesses more and more often are now outsourcing all of their marketing to agencies. So he's like, you will have very low job security if you go get a marketing job for one company. He's like, now, the middle road is you go get a marketing job, or you go get a job at a marketing agency. That way, if the agency loses the client, you should still be okay, unless you're the reason that they lost the client. You should still be okay, because generally they have other clients, and so there's more job security there. And he's like, the best way you go about this degree is, he's like, go be a marketer that other people are hiring you for. So that way you're either a freelance marketer or you're an agency. And he's like, when you have that ability, then, or whenever you have that position, then you have the ability to say, hey, I like you as a client. I like you as a client. No, I don't like working with you. And he really kind of explained that process for me. And I, like you were saying earlier in this interview, was I wasn't really realizing it at the time of how much that one conversation would impact me. But looking back on it, I think that was probably the reason why I was able to fall into marketing, or into the marketing agency route, because I was probably subconsciously thinking about it, and understanding what makes a good marketing position versus a bad marketing position. So Mark Turpin had a huge, positive impact on me. And then the other one was a guy named Wayne Glenn, and he was a marketing and management teacher at our university, and I had him for a couple different classes, and I couldn't tell you a single thing he told us out of the textbook, but it was all of the extra conversations I had with with Wayne Glenn that was so valuable for me. It was the 5 to 10 minutes afterwards that I would stay after a class and talk to him about. At the time, I was already doing some marketing, and I already had a client, and so I was talking to him a little bit about what I was doing, and then he was giving me advice, because he himself had businesses before, and he's worked with some really, really large Fortune 500 businesses as a consultant. So he was able to give me some great advice on just business and entrepreneurship and work-life balance. And those like extra 5 and 10-minute conversations with Wayne Glenn were so valuable for me.
I think when you can really see that whole perspective, isn't it? Like, I'm going to be X or I'm going to be Y, but then out of that decision, there's this sort of global idea of, well, you can go in this route or that route, or this will probably take you here and that will take you there. Then all of a sudden you feel like you've got a little bit of empowerment, don't you? Because you can still follow your passion, whatever that happens to be, but there are different ways to use it, and it really sounds like it's those sorts of things that really came across.
Yeah, 100%. It's about finding the right balance between having intentionality but also having an open mind.
Yeah, I can really get that, because as a musician, it's that kind of, you're following basically your dream. You're doing what you really love, but at the same time, sometimes there's lots of gigs, sometimes there's not so much gigs, sometimes you supplement it with something else, or you do a different route, and like you say, to be open to all those things and see them as a fabric of what you do, I think is something which is quite hard for some people to understand until you sort of get into the profession and understand how the realities of that work. And I think being taught by people who see a profession in lots of different ways, and like I say, if you're involved in a bank and you see how all that works, and people who are actually, I guess, teaching it from the real world, as it were, rather than a textbook, and that's when you really start to understand how the education side and real life kind of come together.
Exactly. It was once said to me that to pretty much don't take advice from someone that you wouldn't want to trade places with. And it's so important to actually learn by doing. And so, like, whenever, like, for instance, as me looking up to a teacher, I'd much rather look up to a professor or a teacher or anyone in life if they have done something that I actually care about doing. So a business teacher, I want to make sure that they actually have business experience, not just understanding the curriculum and understanding the specific textbook that they're teaching out of. I want to make sure that they actually know what they're doing outside of that textbook, because that's where the real value is going to come in from.
Yeah, that real life experience is absolutely key, isn't it? Who did you admire when you were young?
I'm probably going to give a basic answer here. I've listened to a couple of your other interviews, and I know some people have given this answer before, and I'm going to have to repeat it. I'm going to have to say my dad. I definitely admired my dad a lot whenever I was young, and the reason being, as I said, we come from a very middle class background. My dad was always a construction worker, still is in some capacity, whether he's doing freelance work or working for another company. He's always been in the contracting or construction business, building patio covers and sunrooms and decks and room additions and building a whole house. And he's done pretty much all of it. But what I've seen from him is his work ethic. That's the main thing that I've really admired from him whenever I was young. Was I would see him leave first thing in the morning at 6 or 7 a.m. and he wouldn't even get back sometimes until 7 or 8 p.m. and sometimes even later. And it wasn't like that all of my life, but for the large majority of it, especially in the summers, he would utilize every moment of daylight to get as much work done as possible. And what that taught me was just work ethic. And then really actually at age of, I guess I was about 13 years old, I started wanting to shop and like started just wanting new clothes. And my parents didn't really have enough money to just go buy me anything. So they're like, okay, well, hey, dad can use an extra helper. At the time he was self-employed. And so he was able to have me just kind of tag along in the jobs and do miscellaneous labor work whenever I was with him. And so I started working with him every single summer from the age of about 13 to I guess probably 20. I think 20 was the last time that I worked with him. So it was probably about 7 summers in a row, maybe 8 summers. And I went from just doing miscellaneous labor stuff to maybe painting to all the way up to doing all of the carpentry work. And it's just being out there in everything from extremely hot 100 degrees and humid weather all the way to 0 degrees and freezing, and being out there regardless, getting the job done no matter what the weather, no matter how much you feel like it or don't feel like it, just putting in the work and getting the job done. That's something I've always admired from him. Whether work was slow in the winter, which it would slow down heavily in the winter, or it would speed up in the summer, he would do what it took to get the job done and provide for the family. And I have a huge admiration for that.
Yeah, I mean, that really is a big impact, isn't it? That whole worth ethic and actually seeing it in the whole and understanding that. And you're right, a lot of people have said for this, their dad or a family member. But I think in some ways I really like that answer, because there are some times when you kind of take all that for granted, and I think, but to really understand, and have the gratitude for those gifts that they're doing, the kind of seeing how the reality works, seeing what they do for you, seeing the sacrifices they make, and then, like I said, if you get to spend all those summers working together, actually having that time, which isn't something that everyone has. You can't sort of necessarily take your kids to work every day, and my dad was a self-employed mechanic. I got to spend time doing that as well, and I never quite picked up the mechanical skills that he had, but it certainly meant I did have the time that we could share. And I think just really understanding that, I think especially when you are younger, going through those years, I think if you can be grateful of all those things, then I think it just gives you a slightly different relationship and an understanding, which I think can only stand you in good stead, really.
Oh, it really, really does. I mean, just being able to experience that much of someone from the moment they wake up to getting home, that's something that most people, especially in your family, don't get to experience. And when you experience that side of them, you get to understand them on such a higher level and such a deeper level. And it was just something I'm forever grateful for.
Yeah, I definitely love the time thing, because you can sit down and have all the heart-to-hearts in the world, but it's often those snippets of information or support or understanding that just comes from those regular conversations that I think is something quite magical that, yeah, like you say, you really can't get any other way.
Exactly.
What was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Ooh, there's been a couple pieces. Do you mind if I give like 2?
No, please do. Whatever you think is going to give us some value, that would be fantastic.
Cool. So I am going to go a little bit more abstract here and say that none of these pieces were given directly to me. They were things that I've learned from, for instance, like an online mentor or something that I may have read in a book. And so the first one would be that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And I think that was Jim Rohn that said that, but it goes around pretty frequently in the entrepreneurial space and the self-development space. But the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, it's just so true. And what it's done is allowed me to think bigger and really actually focus with more intention to build my network and figure out how can I get around people that are either making more money or people that are living a healthier lifestyle or people that are better communicators, people that actually have goals and really want to take their life somewhere. And maybe actually like how can like instead of just having the people with ambition around you, how can you surround yourself with the people that have already done what you're wanting to do? Understanding that and thinking about networking as in, hey, how can these people affect my life, as in like, hey, if I spend too much time with them, are they going to affect me positively or negatively? Are they going to help me achieve my goals or take me away from my goals? Looking at it in a really black and white context like that has really changed the way I network. And I'd say that that's been huge for me. The other one, I have no idea who said this, but it was the more you learn, the more you earn. I've always just thought that, and growing up, that hey, you can earn only as much as you work. So if you want to make $20, you have to go work 1 hour, and then if you want to work 5 hours, or if you want to make $500, then you have to work X amount of hours. And so I always thought that your ability to make money was tied to how much time that you put into something. And understanding now that that's not necessarily true, and that you can actually the real way to actually become more wealthy is to get paid off of results or to get paid off of what you know. For instance, I think you were telling me that you had a music membership site that was coming out. That's something that you're going to put a lot of time into from the beginning, and you're not going to have to spend a ton of time in the long run. Or maybe consulting. I could get paid $250 in 1 hour for meeting with a business owner to give them some marketing strategies, and that's exactly what a lawyer would get paid. And they have to spend, I don't know, 8 years just in school to even get to that point. I'm 24 and I can do that. And so just understanding that truly the more research you put into your craft, or the more you go and learn about a certain subject or a certain passion, you can really become super, super valuable for other people that want to obtain that same level of knowledge. And then you can sell your knowledge. And that's an awesome thing to do.
Yeah, and I think really thinking like that and understanding that is very true. And you're absolutely right. I've got a music membership site which is going to be launching, or certainly beta testing in February. And it's that, you like to say, that there's a lot of work going into it. There's a lot of understanding of who you're trying to support and who you're trying to help. But certainly for me, it was that kind of, I've been in the music business a long time. I've been an educator for a long time, and people kept asking me the same questions. How do I do this in my school? How do I affect children? How do I give them a great opportunity? I'm scared of delivering music. It's not something I'm trained in, but I want to be able to do it for my children. How do I go about it? And then it's just that opportunity cost. It's like, well, I can just go in and I can deliver the odd workshop, which I've been doing for many years, or I can actually create something which can benefit many, many people. And once it's up and running and we've got all the courses live and that kind of thing, we're going to do some Q&As, and as many people who want to be involved can be involved. And I think, like I say, it's just slightly just changing your idea about how you can go about supporting people, and what that then means to them, and what it can then, like you say, financially mean to you.
Exactly. And the other part of that about the more you learn, the more you earn, is it changes. Even if maybe you don't want to create a product, maybe you don't want to have this big website that Mark might be creating, or maybe you don't want to be a consultant and you just want to work a normal job. That's totally fine. But shifting your mindset from, if you want to make more money, you have to be there for a year and then wait for that 50 cents per hour raise, or you have to be there for 5 years and then you get an annual bonus. Like taking your mindset away from that and figuring out how can you learn more to then provide more value to the organization that you're with. because the more value that you can provide to someone or a company, the more you can get paid for that. And that's whenever you can start getting your raises. That's when you can start getting those promotions. Don't wait for life to happen. Take advantage of the opportunities that you have and do something about it. We live in an information heavy world. I mean, we have any information that we need at the pretty much at our fingertips with smartphones nowadays. And so all you have to do is go search some things, go learn some things, go read a book, go listen to all of these incredibly valuable free podcasts, and you'll become far more valuable to different people that you might be interacting with on a day-to-day basis.
That's so true. And something I heard recently as well was that kind of, even if, like you say, you're working for someone else and you seem you perceive yourself to be an employee, but if you do that job and you perceive yourself as if you were the business owner, not that you're going to make decisions, but you've got that pride and that work ethic and that wanting to really be the person that's sort of waving the flag for that organisation, that really comes across really, really strong for the people around you. And like you say, that then just gives you that with knowledge and understanding, just really takes you in a different level than the majority of people just going to do your 9 to 5.
Yeah, everything you do it, I mean, with truly everything you have.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Ooh, um, well, I'm already pretty young. So, Mark, do you have a specific age that you would like me to dip down to?
So let's think as if you were sort of in high school and just maybe slightly unsure, I guess, of the direction, or feeling maybe stuck in the system, but knowing there was sort of more to you than what you were feeling. So just sort of that
Yeah.
kind of age idea, I guess.
Okay. So I'd say probably to my high school self, I would say back then I hated reading. I hated, primarily reading because I thought reading was the only extra way to learn. But additionally, I thought that the only types of books out there were the typical books that you read in high school, the fiction books that have all these stories to them, and sometimes they're good stories, and most of the time for me, they just never captured my interest. And so I thought all of this, pretty much almost all of my life growing up, that books were dumb and that reading just wasn't for me. And maybe shifting that mindset as I was in high school to, hey, there are so many incredible books that, like, for instance, I've always really been interested in cars, specifically like exotic cars, your Lamborghinis, your Ferraris. I mean, I'm talking from whenever I was in third grade. Instead of wanting toys, I would want a car magazine. But I was always trying to figure out, how can I make more money, or how can I get to the point that I can own one of those cars, because my current environment had no cars like that. But how can I mean, people were buying them, so why couldn't I? And so telling my high school self, hey, do you remember that passion that you had for cars and wanting to be able to have something really like an exotic car like a Lamborghini? Well, clearly you have to make more money. And so if you want to make more money, you don't have to wait to college to do so. Maybe you should go pick up a book on, for instance, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Or maybe you could go pick up a book on work ethic, or on business, or on entrepreneurship, or on finance. And understanding that there were all of these other types of books out there, and podcasts, and now videos on YouTube and everything, that would have been a game changer for me, because what that would have done next would have opened the door to realize that I didn't actually have to go to university to do what I'm doing. I didn't have to go to a college, this 4-year degree, spend thousands of dollars to go into student loan debt just to go get a degree. Instead, I could go learn things online. I could go maybe buy a couple different courses for a couple different $100 online, and I could learn these different skills and start doing them now. Whenever I was in high school, I could have been doing some of the skills that I currently have now, and I didn't need a degree for that. And that would have saved me a ton of time and a ton of mistakes.
I love that, and I think about that more and more these days. I have a podcast network now of 3 podcasts, and a few years ago I didn't even know what a podcast was, and I didn't go to university to learn that. I didn't study it from any traditional method. I found stuff online. I listened to people. I found out what I liked. I took a course, like you're saying. To begin with, it was even a free course, and all that stuff's out there. And I think when you realise that it's your education and you can do it in your way, even if you're within the system still, that just frees you, I think. And it just means that, like you say, the world is your oyster then, and whatever you're into, whatever you aspire to, you can start doing it now. You don't have to wait till some time in the future. And I think if that means you're living in the now and you feel like you're learning in the now, then you're on to an absolute winner.
Exactly. I once got the opportunity to interview someone named Jesse Cole, and his entire motto is whatever is normal, do the exact opposite. And I just love that motto, and I think that just goes against everything you would ever learn in school. And understanding that motto and truly living by it in school would have done me a world of a difference.
Good. So as we've just managed to give everyone permission to go and do completely the opposite that school has said.
Well, within reason.
Exactly.
Reason.
Yeah. No, but I love that. I think that freeing the shackles, I think, is really where education is heading, and just that idea that it's your life and your education, and doing it your way is absolutely key.
Completely.
What does your future look like?
Well, okay, so near future, obviously, like I said, I'm getting married. I'm going to be moving to a new city. This is really exciting for me because another piece of advice or another saying that goes around in the business world is the more hands you shake, the more money you make. And honestly, while that's nice and all, I honestly just love connecting with new people as well. And so being able to go into a new city and go learn, it really adapt to an entire new network of people, see what type of value I can give to them, what type of relationships I can make. That's going to be super, super exciting for me. And with that being said, with all of those new relationships and all of those new opportunities that will then come from those, I have no clue where I will be then 5 years from there. So it's really, really hard to see what my long-term future looks like, especially like you said, a couple years ago, you didn't even know what a podcast was, and now you have 3 of them. For me, let's see, probably 4 years ago, I didn't even realize that I wanted to start a company. It was about 3.5 years ago I realized I wanted to start a company, and I didn't understand what that even meant. I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go have like 1 or 2 clients, and I'll make some Facebook ads for them. Now I have quite a bit more than that, and I'm also getting paid for consulting, and I'm getting paid to do speaking across the country. And the world changes so quickly, and our opportunities change so quickly as long as we are open to those opportunities. And so I really don't have an answer for you as far as where does my life look, or what does my life look like in a couple years from now. But I will say in the next year or two, I'm going to be focusing on how can I build my network and really tap into a market that I know no one in. How can I become known in a really, really known by everyone in a market that not a single person knows me in? Because from there, I have no clue where those opportunities will go.
I really love that as an answer, because like you say, it's very hard to say that in X number of years I'm going to live in this city and have this house and this wife and this number of children, because life just doesn't work like that. But I think knowing how you want your future to feel, or certainly the sort of area that you want to head to, that you do have control over. Like you say, I want to go and meet people, I want to do this, I want to feel like this, I want to put myself in this position. And then I think to be able to then sit back enough and say, I don't know where that's going to head or where it's going to lead me, but I know I've got enough control and enough experience within myself to know how that's going to go. I think that's great advice for people listening. It's like you say, you might go to college, you might decide not to, you might take the entrepreneurial route straight from school. But as long as you know you're heading in the right direction and doing it on your terms, you might not know the end goal, and probably none of us know the real end goal, but actually you know that your future is bright, I think, and that's probably the key.
Exactly. And as a very quick, very real, tangible example for what I mean as far as when you meet people, other opportunities arise. Just for instance, taking this podcast interview right now between you and I, Mark. I remember I went to school, I went to college and got all of those different internships. One of those internships, the owner of the company had invited me to this random conference to go help work it as a volunteer. This guy's name was Jay Austin. So he said, "Hey Zach, there's this conference in Chicago in 2016. You got to go to it. You're going to help me volunteer at this." I said, "Okay, great." He said it was called Podcast Movement. I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I've heard of a podcast before." And so I went to Podcast Movement. I started volunteering. I then met John Lee Dumas and Kate Erickson. I made a great impression upon them. We kept an awesome relationship going. We saw each other at another networking event I went to, or another conference I went to called Social Media Marketing World. At that conference, they said, Zach, we're seeing you at all these different conferences now. You have a great personality. You seem to connect with people really well. We would love for you to work our booth at the next podcast movement. And so they've had me at their booth the next two podcast movements. So 2017 in Anaheim and 2018 in oh gosh, why did I just forget where 2018 was?
Philadelphia.
Thank you, Philadelphia. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Mark, pretty sure I've seen you at both of those conferences now, correct?
I wasn't able to go to Philadelphia. Sadly, I had to miss that for a family reason, sort of fairly last minute. But I was in Anaheim, yes, and we did spend a bit of time in Anaheim. So yes,
Okay.
and it was exactly on, let's say, on JLD's booth.
Exactly. And so that's how we got to know each other. Then we became friends on Facebook. We stayed in touch, and then you reached out and said, Zach, I'd love to have you on your podcast. So I wouldn't be on this podcast if I never even went to college to then go have the internship, to then go and get invited to the podcast event, and then went from so on and so on, and now here I am. So one connection can really just change everything for you.
That really is true, and I think, just like you say, just one after the other, follow it, see where it goes, and then just allow the rest of it to fall into place. And like you say, you never quite know where that next question or that next invite is gonna take you. And I think that's really exciting, and especially in this modern age where everything, like you say, is changing so fast.
Exactly.
Now, you may have covered this a little bit already. You've talked about some books that you really liked, but what podcast, book, video, film, song, or resources had the biggest impact on your life, and why?
Okay, so the biggest impact, there's two of them. One is a super abstract answer, and the other is a more direct answer. I'll go more abstract first. The biggest, I guess, impact of a podcast, book, etc. that I've had was actually my own podcast. And it's not because of what I've learned from all of the specific guests. It's not because, like, for instance, if anyone's listening to this, I'm not saying, hey, go listen to my podcast. It was the best thing ever. What I'm saying is, being the host of a podcast, it just opens you up to so many opportunities. It opens you up to so many more connections. And once again, those connections can lead to so many other things, and you have no clue where they'll go. So being able to be the host of a podcast, having that leverage of a platform to add value to your guests, saying, hey, so-and-so, I'd love to have you as my guest because I have other people listening to my show. You should hop on my show. I'd love to interview you. And they're so much more open to it. Even if they're a very, very busy entrepreneur or a very busy person, they're open to being on your show because there's value immediately that you're giving them. And so anyway, being the host of a podcast was really, really it was a game changer for me. But a more tangible answer, something that someone can say, okay, cool, I'm going to go buy this right now or go listen to this right now, was probably the 10X Rule by a guy named Grant Cardone. This book was huge for me. I read it back in college. I was going through a bit of a depressed state of my life. I was by no means living my best life. I was a little depressed. I wasn't really focusing on my health. I was not running my company at the time. And when I read this, it inspired me. I mean, I just snapped out of everything. It inspired me to write an ebook and publish it on a website and remake the website all in 7 days. I went and got a client about 2 months, or not 2 months, about 2 weeks after that. And I completely changed. I was at the time I was trying to party and everything, completely changed all of those habits, started becoming more healthy, got back in the gym, and was really focused on bettering myself. So the 10X rule was huge as far as getting me to take more action and take more responsibility for my life. I stopped blaming other people and other experiences and other instances for why I was how I was, and instead decided to finally take responsibility for where I was in life and realize that if I wanted anything better out of life, I had to do something about it. And that was that's why I got so much out of that book.
It really is sort of a running theme which comes across so loud and clear having chatted to you. That kind of, take life on your terms, do it now, get what you need, find what you need, put yourself out there, and that, that excitement and that feeling like anything is possible really comes through from the way you talk and obviously your experiences as well. So for people who are as excited as me to sort of see where you go and what comes up, what's the best way for them to find out more and get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, honestly, the best way to get in touch with me is either going to be my personal Facebook page or my Instagram page. I mean, my name on Facebook and on Instagram is just Zach Hesterberg, Zach, and then Hesterberg. I'm very, very active on both of those pages. I do have a business page on Facebook. Don't bother with it though. Just connect me with on my personal one. Send me a friend request. Shoot me a message, whether that be on Facebook or on Instagram. I would love. I mean, if any of you guys have spent the last, I don't know how long this interview's been going on. I think probably 30 to 40 minutes. If any of you guys have been on this show for that long, please post a screenshot on your Instagram story or on your Facebook. Tag me and let's get connected. I'd love to even just hop on a 5-minute phone call with any of your current listeners, Mark, and just honestly just thank them for their time and get to know how I can provide more value to them.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. And thank you, Zach, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your amazing experiences.
You bet. Seriously, thank you so much for having me, Mark. I love your show. Whenever you reached out, I definitely wanted to make sure I wanted to be able to provide as much value for you as possible. You've had some incredible guests, and I love what you're doing. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.